Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Bill Seals from Cyclone Report to cover this CyHawk game coming up this weekend in Iowa City. It's my first time covering a CyHawk game at Kinnick Stadium, so pretty excited about that. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button, especially if you're on YouTube. Drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what your final score prediction is going to be for this Iowa versus Iowa State game coming up this weekend. So, Bill, happy to have you back on after a year of twiddling our thumbs waiting for this game to come back. Cyclones coming off that 21-3 victory over North Dakota. It seems like it's really a lukewarm response from the media and the fan base. It's just kind of like a victory, but didn't exactly look good.
Yeah, I after the first two plays of the game, I thought it could be pretty close to a route, maybe like what the Iowa game was, and they got that quick score in two plays. And I don't think you ever see Iowa State begin a season like that where they just throw one long pass play that set up a 21 yarder for a touchdown. I don't think you ever see Iowa State offensively, go to the air and just sling it around like that right off the bat. And Taylor Mauser, first year offensive coordinator, we might touch on him in a little bit, but yeah, they went to it and got a quick score, and then it just kind of dragged out from there. And really, I think the offense only ran like 45 plays the entire second quarter. Iowa State was on defense in that game. North Dakota had a drive that went over 12 minutes. They converted, I believe, on 7 third downs, kept the ball for 12 plus minutes, ran 23 plays, went 88 yards, and they only came away with 3 points. Those were the only 3 points of the game for the Fighting Hawks. So, and then, really the offense, it's hard to get a real good gauge on it. Cyclone fans like what they saw those first two plays. They put 7 on the board, but then they're on the bench the entire second quarter, and they end up grinding out a 21-3 win. It wasn't ever really a game, I think, that was in doubt, but it was just kind of one of those slog fests, I guess you could say, in a way. And certainly, I think defensively, some things to work on for this team, and then offensively, I think just kind of an incomplete evaluation, really, just because you only got to see this new offense. It's always going to be the Matt Campbell offense, I guess. You would say a new coordinator, though, and we only really got to see a little bit of that there in game one. So we'll see how it goes against Iowa.
I was just going to ask about that. Did you notice any maybe significant differences in the offense? Because right, they're only gonna show so much against an FCS opponents, but have you heard about maybe differences from the players? Like the big thing for Iowa's new offense is, oh, there's pre-snap motion. So anything like that with Iowa State and Taylor Mauser taking over?
Well, I think one thing you could say about Mauser is that he's first and foremost a player's coach. He's always been a player's coach. He was the guy that kind of initiated the recruitment of Brock Purdy. He's been on the staff several years and just gets to know these guys on a personal level. And one thing that I kind of gained out of today's press conference is they talked about that, that first drive, the two plays. The one they forced the throw down the field to Jalen Noel, and for 50, I believe it was like 53 yards. And I think one thing I got today is that Mauser kind of put a lot of trust into like no Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, Rocco Becht, when he was kind of getting his play sheet together or his script for that game, putting a lot of, talking to the players. What do you like? What do you feel comfortable with? You've watched this defense play. What do you want us to do? So I think that was something that's maybe a little bit new. I think Shieldhouse had good rapport with his players, but it just seems to be maybe with Mauser, he's gonna trust those veteran players a little bit more. And last year Rocco was his first start was against the Hawks, and now he's a returning starter. They've got those two senior wide receivers. So I think he's going to lean into that veteranness of this offense maybe a little bit. And I guess that's probably the big difference. I think schematically, probably going to still be doing about the same thing. Maybe they're going to run to pass, or excuse me, pass to run a little bit more this season instead of maybe trying to run to set up the pass. I'm kind of getting that vibe a little bit. And then kind of North Dakota played into that a little bit too. A lot of teams last season, and North Dakota kind of carried it over and tried to stack the box, and a lot of those RPO things with Rocco, where he had the choice what he wanted to do because of how UND's defense was playing. It turned into a pass just because they were kind of stacking the box and wanting to take that away. And I guess maybe they watched a couple Abu Sama game film highlights from last season too, and they sought to kind of take that away. And Iowa State really didn't do much on the ground, but they didn't really try and establish the run either.
You know what I remember most from last year, with it being Rocco's first game against the Hawkeyes, what it appeared like was they were really trying to dink and dunk their way down the field, really get the ball to the sidelines. They weren't really letting Rocco throw the ball past like maybe 8 to 10 yards. Has that opened up quite a bit?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just I the offensive line's the other thing too. They didn't give up a lot of sacks last season, but it was a unit that really, I mean, they didn't grade out very well. They were probably better with the pass than they were the run. But I think there were a lot of times too where Rocco didn't get sacked because he was kind of getting rid of the ball, and he wasn't taking those sacks. He was being decisive in where he wanted to go and got rid of the ball. So I think maybe that lent itself against Iowa, and maybe some of the pressure they were able to generate. He was wanting to get rid of the ball quickly, but I think we'll just see how the protection goes. I was pretty happy, I think, with what I saw out of the pass protection against North Dakota. And the running backs seem to pick up those blitzes well. Jalen Jackson's another one they got out of Eastern Michigan as a transfer. He's going to be a third down guy, and I think he's probably seen it all too, as far as like blitz pickups and stuff. But I think the backs have improved in that way, and maybe that does give Rocco the time to try and push the ball down the field this season.
So the one thing I wanted to ask in reference to this last game before we move on to the defense and obviously the big news of Caleb Bacon going down, was there maybe something you didn't learn from this North Dakota game where maybe you were hoping to learn it, or you're expecting to see against Iowa that maybe you haven't seen yet, or something like that? I don't know if that question really makes sense, but something that maybe was talked about in the preseason. It's like, well, we didn't see that in game one, maybe
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, there could be a lot.
Okay.
Maybe that's by design. The injuries on defense are pretty well chronicled. They gave up 174 rushing yards to North Dakota. I don't think I saw that coming. But is that a product of three linebackers really being out? They had Bacon went out. I think he only played 5 snaps in the game. Went out on a punt coverage rep. And then also Will McLaughlin, the Sam linebacker, looks like he's going to probably be out again this week. And then Cale Brazina was one of their freshmen they talked about. I could have even seen him maybe pushing to start in game one. He's been that highly regarded. Jack Sadowski was a game one starter as a true freshman last year as well. So they're not afraid to roll with those young guys. So I think defensively, Cyclone fans probably got to hope that they see something they didn't in the first game, because it was not very pretty. And when I think was like 11 of 20 that North Dakota was on third down against Iowa State, and it's just remarkable that they had that many third downs really to even attempt, and they go over 50%. So I think against Iowa, they hope that there's some things they didn't see, and maybe positive things that they see in that one that they didn't in North Dakota. And the defensive line, I don't think they played very well either. They have gotten back to, sounds like, to some fundamental things that maybe you'd work on or you'd rep in camp or in spring ball. Kind of gotten back to the basics, I think, since that UND game and in anticipation of the Iowa game. And then offensively, we didn't see a whole lot. 45 plays. We didn't really see how this offensive line can run block all that much. We didn't really, we saw one highlight reel play from Abu Sama where he hurdled that one guy near the Iowa State sideline, and didn't he kind of tweaked something there a little bit too in that game. And I think just the nature of an FCS team, they didn't really put him back in there. I think he'll be fine for the Iowa game. And but really it's just kind of a one-dimensional thing. We really didn't see a whole lot out of that running game. So maybe that's something, and that's going to have to be something, because they're not going to, against Iowa's defense, they're not going to certainly want to be one dimensional. So they're going to have to try and get into that a little bit and try and get some semblance of balance. I don't think that's always been the case against Iowa, though. It's usually had to be the quarterback. 2 years ago, I think it was Hunter Deckers, that the starter then, that engineered that. I believe it was like a 99-yard scoring drive that ended up being the difference in the game. But it was just that one drive that they had to put it on the quarterback's shoulders, and kind of got the sense that was the case last year with Rocco too. And that would have been his second career start.
Yeah. So you mentioned it a bit ago, talking about Caleb Bacon going down. You mentioned as well that they're pretty thin at linebacker relative to the three typical starters. Man, from what I heard, I admittedly I haven't watched the film yet from the Iowa State North Dakota game. I'm going to do that either tonight or tomorrow. But I had heard through another podcast that the air kind of went out of the stadium, and that's where things went a little sideways when Caleb got hurt. What do you think they do? How much does this affect the defense? Because from what I've heard and read about Bacon, is he is kind of the leader and the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak, for the defense. How much does it affect them? What do they do to compensate for not having him?
Well, yeah, they had just given him that special number, that number 26 as well, in the offseason to honor Jack Whitfer, and another former walk-on turned scholarship player in his own right under Dan McCarney. And they think very highly of Caleb, and he ascended to scholarship status from walk-on last season, and had just had a tremendous offseason. And he came off the bench all those 13 games last year too. So his first start as a Cyclone, he goes 5 plays on defense and gets injured. What could be, well, most of the season. It's going to cost him there. He's had surgery on that. So I think without him, they turn to Jack Sadowski. He was the one who is number one on the depth chart that they released on Tuesday. He started all 13 games last season, but really throughout the year, as Bacon ascended, Sadowski, although he started, it was kind of just maybe in title only, because his reps or his snaps kind of dwindled as Bacon's picked up. So, but now here we are, kind of back to square one, and Sadowski, I think, is going to take the starting job. Zach Lovett, who was a transfer that they got a year ago, and they're going to, I think he's better in passing downs. He's really good, as he's probably their top blitzing linebacker. So I think you're going to see a case where Sadowski plays a majority of like the rushing downs, and then in passing situations, maybe Lovett comes in there and does that. Outside, Kale Brazina was one of them. I think I mentioned here a short while ago. He's going to come back for this game, and supposedly he's a guy that can play all 3 positions, but he's listed on the depth chart at Sam. But I'll tell you what, it would not surprise me. They feel really good about Jacob Ellis at the Sam spot while Will McLaughlin's out. Sounds like Will's going to be out again this week, and Jacob Ellis one of the highest graded linebackers according to PFF. So I think they feel really good about Ellis and maybe some of the depth there. And it would not surprise me if they switch Brazina back inside. And I don't know that he would start at Mike, but he's someone that can play inside and outside. And I just think this Iowa State defense, you better be really good up the middle when you run a 3-3-5. You've got to have, then I think on the D line perennially, they've been very good inside at the nose and the tackle, but you've got to have really good linebacker play at those Mike and Will spots. So if they think that Brazina can help them there more so than outside, I think they got to make that move because they've got to be solid up the middle, and they are at safety too with Bo Freeler. So we'll see how that works out. But I think Brazina's a guy that could potentially go inside if needed.
So by the sounds of what you're saying, they're at least decently confident in that second group that they're going to have to look to at that linebacker spot.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear about injuries, when you hear about Bacon going down, my immediate thought is, oh, Iowa's running backs are going to have a field day. And not only do they have like one or two good running backs, they've got four guys who've had some experience in that they are confident in, between Kamari Moulton, Caleb Johnson, Jazz Patterson, and Le'Shawn Williams. They've got a stable. I mean, you saw Jazz Patterson break off that big run last year at Jack Trice. So,
Right.
is that a concern of yours or Iowa State's? Do you think that they're gonna do what they can to? Well, do you think they're worried about what Iowa's gonna do on the ground? I guess.
Well, I think most definitely they are. And after North Dakota goes for 174 yards on Saturday, I did talk to that was one of my questions to Campbell today about that, and he cited that he thought that it did improve after halftime, and that was kind of one thing too about North Dakota is Iowa State really went into that game not knowing what it was going to get with UND's offense, just because they had a new offensive coordinator. They had a quarterback that was third string a year ago. The guy had thrown 3 career passes. So I think they maybe had an idea what they were going to get. I don't know if it didn't. It doesn't sound like it played out the way they thought it would. They made some adjustments at halftime, and it sounds like Campbell was happier with the job they did against the run in the second half. Whereas I think with Iowa, yeah, they've got a new offensive coordinator, maybe some changes there, but I think they know that Iowa is going to try and establish that run certainly, and it's tale as old as time. I guess that they know going in what Iowa's going to try and do, and if Iowa State can't stop the run, it could be a long day. They had that one drive against North Dakota that they ate up 12 plus minutes. It could be a few of those drives, and Iowa State's defense has got to be in favorable positions on third down against in game one. It was like a bunch of third and twos, third and threes. You'll notice that when you go through that tape, Eliot, they were in favorable position. I mean, it wasn't like they were converting on 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13, just, crippling plays in the passing game. This was very methodical, and they just, they grinded up the clock and they had a lot of success. So a lot to clean up for Iowa State when you're going against a team like Iowa.
Now, I'm not sure how much you've seen of this on Twitter, Bill, but there's been a ton of debate between the fan base right now about like stacking up position group by position group, Iowa versus Iowa State. I posted on our board about this, and of course, our premium subscribers were all over it. But where I'm at, and I think someone else put this out there. I apologies, I can't give you credit, but where I'm at is Iowa State is really only definitively better than Iowa at quarterback and at wide receiver. Are you on board with that? Do you think that the Cyclones could or should give Iowa some run in some different position groups? Or like, I might be biased. Iowa's the team I cover, and I see them all the time.
Right.
Right? So I guess I'm
Well,
curious what you think on that.
I would put Iowa State safeties up against anybody in the country as long as those guys stay healthy. Bo Freeler, Jeremiah Cooper, and Malik Verdon, if they keep those three healthy. That last year you didn't see those guys play together very often. But I would put those three safeties up against anybody that Iowa State's probably going to play this fall. But yeah, I would agree with you at quarterback and wide receiver. I think Iowa State has the edge there, and not a whole lot of depth really that we've seen for the Cyclones at running back. Again, you didn't see much of that in game one. They got Jalen Jackson out of Eastern Michigan. He's supposed to get some run. But yeah, you just really haven't seen a whole lot of that. And then I think out of Abu Sama, you've seen the home run hitter there, but in some of these games and against a team like Iowa, you're going to want a running back if there's 4 or 5 yards to be gained. You're going to want a guy to pick those up instead of maybe trying to look for the big play or the home run and then end up with a no gain or a loss of one. So we're still kind of, I mean, maybe waiting to see that a little bit out of Sama as well. He's made a ton of big plays. But yeah, getting back to your original point, though, I think Iowa State's safety group is really good.
So even what I did when I put those things together was I clumped the DBs together. So as opposed to putting safeties.
Okay.
So
Yeah, and then there's some with certainly without TJ Tampa, there's maybe some question marks, but I thought that corner group, I thought that they played pretty well in that opener. They weren't really tested. I think North Dakota's quarterback only threw for like 105 yards, but it was pretty clear what their intent was going to be from the start, and that was going to try to be to run the ball. So yeah, I guess maybe if you lump all the DBs together, I could see your point. But if we want to break them out by individual DB positions, Iowa State safeties are pretty good.
Okay. And when we talk about safeties, obviously at Iowa, we're talking about Xavier Wampa, who is a
Right.
five-star recruit, and Quinn Schulte, who's about in his 10th year of college football. So so
Right.
that might be a conversation. I
Mhm.
don't know a ton about Iowa State safeties, but based on your confidence, that very well could be a conversation about who's better in that safety spot. And the other position I wanted to talk about too, Iowa's offensive line, despite the bevy of experience, isn't what one would consider a typical Iowa offensive line in, being maulers, in having an NFL draft pick. Like the Tristan Wirfs is long gone, right? They've
Mhm.
got they've got the guys, then they've got the experience. Something like 250 games played between like the 8 guys who they would consider as part of their rotation. But seemingly they've taken a step forward. Consistency, right? Like
Mhm.
having Cade McNamara being able to take the top off of the defense at least a little bit against Illinois State really took the pressure off the offensive line. Where are things at with the Iowa State offensive line? Because I didn't know how to compare them because again, well, one, I haven't watched the film, but two, seemingly Iowa has taken that step forward, but it was Illinois State, right?
Yeah. Well, the offensive line, we talked about injuries on this, and they had 2 guys that were out that probably could have helped them in the opener. In Jalen Travis, who was a Princeton transfer that they got, it was a grad transfer from Princeton, and he has been dealing with an injury that has put him out. I heard it could cost him, maybe into I don't know that it would be into the conference season, but I think the non-conference slate, they get a bye week after Iowa. Maybe that changes if he doesn't play this weekend. But Campbell did say that both Travis and Dalen Hazard, who was he had an Achilles injury last year that took him out of the entire season. So I think that maybe with him at the rehab process, maybe gone some weeks here into the season. But supposedly both of those guys came back to practice for the Iowa game. Campbell said that's not really going to mean that they're going to play on Saturday, but they're back practicing. So I think if I had to guess, I don't think either one of those would probably play. I think they'll roll with a lot of what they had against North Dakota, and with that group, I think they feel really good well, they'd feel really good about everybody, but I feel really good about three of those guys. Really, I think Tyler Miller's a multi-year starter, and then they've got Jared Hufford. They moved him inside to center. I think that's going to be one thing that you look back on the season too. If he stays healthy, and they have some better success running the ball than they did a year ago, I think it's going to be that they shored up that center position, because you put Hufford in there, who's a super senior, and I think they were rolling with somebody who was like a red shirt sophomore a year ago in Jim Boniface. So a lot more veteran inside at center. Brendan Black was someone who played as a true freshman about halfway through. He has assumed the starting role there. He's back. And James Neal, really, I guess you could say four guys there with Neal. He was going to move inside, but with Travis joining the team, and now Neal's kind of been forced back outside, so he's playing tackle again. And he was someone, you look at his PFF grades, and they were they were pretty abysmal at the start of last season. But I think he's someone, he was a JUCO transfer they got out of a Kansas JUCO. I think my recollection was he had played basketball and was still kind of new to football. So I think just the nature of him being in that role, he got better at it. He's got a lot of great physical tools. So I think Neal is one too. But really, with these two guys again that are hurt, some guys that could really help them too, and add to the competition there. So really, it's really hard to gauge how this offensive line is going to look. You've got the two injured guys out there. We don't know the status of them, if they're going to play, if it's going to come back on what last week's group was. And last week, that group was only out there for 45 plays. They rotated in about 7 or 8 guys. So really, we didn't see probably what this line is going to look like against Iowa. We haven't really seen it, because of the injured guys and rotating 7 or 8 players there. Who knows what they're going to settle on? I think I have a general idea, but we really don't know till they get there.
One thing I will say, as a UNI grad, someone who used to cover UNI, I am a believer in Ryan Clanton for sure, and what he's done as a coach.
Yeah, and the guys love him too, and he clicks with them. They get it, and it's a different focus maybe than what they had with the prior position coach. But I think the results have been good. But just with this group, as you know, and it's one of the longest that really takes to develop, and it was a group that just was not very good. They made a change at that position group, so now it's year 2 for Clanton, and we'll look, I guess, for some steady progress out of that group, and hopefully one that can run block a little better. I think there were only about, according to PFF, I think there were only about 4 other programs that graded out worse than Iowa State did in run blocking on PFF last season. So the only way to go is up with this group. So I think steady progress we'll see how that comes together.
As someone who has covered Iowa's offense, I know all about only way to go is up.
Right.
Believe me.
Mm-hmm.
So one last thing before we get your score prediction and all that good stuff, Bill. There has been, 2 years ago, obviously Hunter Deckers and Xavier Hutchinson, like that team, a lot of those guys aren't around, but that team went into Kinnick Stadium and got a win. A lot of things had to, Iowa it was almost like neither team wanted to win the game, right?
Well, yeah, Iowa State had Campbell talked about it today. He talked about that game, what they needed to do to win like they did 2 years ago, and he said we didn't play well in that game, is what he said. And he brought up the two times Iowa State had it inside the 10-yard line and didn't put points on the board. So yeah, it certainly lends credence to what you said on Iowa State's side of things anyway.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, and I think this kind of goes both ways for Iowa and for Iowa State, but why is Iowa State, I don't know if fearless is the right word, especially with the youth that's on the roster right now for Iowa State. But why would you first of all, would you consider them maybe quote unquote fearless coming into Kinnick Stadium? And would you and if you do, why?
Well, I think Cyclone fans have to like the way that the offense maybe looked to get started against North Dakota. They aired it out. They weren't they were not worried about being overly aggressive, and they went right to work. Maybe that carries over into Iowa. The different offensive coordinator, Mauser, seems to be a guy that likes to take more shots. And will he be allowed to too? I mean, ultimately, I think Matt Campbell is going to sign off on that. But yeah, I think they need to be more fearless in this game. And instead of, it seems like in the past, they've just played right into Iowa's hands, really, and not taking the shots. But then again, it goes back on the offensive line too. The quarterback's got to have a time to go through and work the ball down the field too, and not be under duress. So that's something I think we need to look for as well. But and you also, I think one thing about Cyclone fans, maybe that they've gotten the sense that this is not a big game for Iowa State with Matt Campbell, that he's more worried about the conference when trying to get to the conference championship game, that he doesn't care about this game. I put his transcript up if I think any of your subscribers can get on and read that on my site. But some of that was brought up too today, and those in the media asking how big this game is to the program, and he talked about that obviously is a big game, the coach speak in that regard. And then, but he said, it seemed like at the end of it, he would say, but you want to be playing great football in October, November, and December, because the idea is to win a conference championship. So I think that's always been the goal, really, of Campbell and this Iowa State program, is to try to get to that conference championship game. And here the Iowa game is in week 2. In past years, I think last year, certainly they were finding themselves. They weren't going to take a whole lot of chances. They weren't going to be, what was your word that you just used?
Fearless.
Fearless, yes. Last year, they with Rocco being in his second start, they didn't know what they were, who they had on offense yet. They weren't going to be fearless against Iowa. They were going to do what they thought that they needed to do to win the game. And I don't think that was really being fearless and taking too many shots. But maybe that changes this year, because they've got the skill players. And I think that they've got the talent on the offensive side of the ball to be fearless if they want. But we'll see what the playbook, or what the script is when they come out on Saturday.
What's the script for a victory to you? How does Iowa State go into Kinnick Stadium and win?
Well, I think I like your word, fearless. They've got the offensive line, I think's got to play well. They've got to get some kind of balance and get the run game going a little bit, and then take some shots. You've got Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, All-American type players. If you ask anyone on the offensive coaching staff at Iowa State, to get those guys, work them down the field, and maybe try to blow the top off the defense a little bit, and make Iowa respect that. They've got the players to do it. I think they've got to try and take some shots. And then I think defensively, they got to get off the field on third down, and getting off the field on third down, I think, starts with Campbell will say you've got to win on first and you've got to win on second down, and put Iowa in 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 9, and not let that deep stable, you said 4 running backs, really good running backs, get going to where you're looking at 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2. So that's the other thing. And then in the game like this, it's been low scoring, it's been close. Iowa State, special teams wise too, you can't have some of those mishaps they've had them in the past. What was it like maybe 4 or 5 years ago at Jack Trice Stadium? The return that gets botched and fumbled. They had a chance to get the ball back and try to go win the game. That they have that happen. And I think they're in pretty good hands, place kicking wise this year with Kyle Conradi. You didn't see him in the opener except for the 3 PATs, but supposedly he's had a really good camp, hitting some ones that are well over 50 yards, and I think they're in good hands there. So they can't lose the game. If it's a close game, they can't lose it on special teams either. They've got to be smart, and they've got to have a kicker that can get the points when they're there.
I tell you what, taking the top off the defense. If Iowa heard that, those safeties heard that, they'd be licking their chops. So
yeah, it could be playing right into their hands too. But
yeah,
I think Iowa State with that personnel, they've got to take their shots. I mean, if you throw one 40 or 50 yards deep and it falls incomplete or whatever, you go 50 yards down the field and you're in a good starting spot, and it ends up in a turnover, so be it. It's a punt, but I think you've got to take your shots, and I think if you can do that, we didn't see Iowa State tight end catch a ball against North Dakota either. I think it's been ages since we've seen that, and I think Ben Bramer is a weapon. We didn't see it all in the North Dakota game, but maybe he is someone that they can get going with as well, with those wide receivers. I think that are going to get they're going to get some attention from Iowa on that back end.
Iowa favored by 2.5. Total I saw is 33.5. Who wins? What's your final score?
Well, I think I don't know if that they can get that over under low enough. Can they? It shifted like 2 points after they announced it. I think it dropped 2 points. Maybe I don't know what it is now, but that's when I looked at it. But Iowa State's just not they've not played well against Iowa in this. It was a game they very easily 2 years ago. They very easily could have lost that game as well, even though I think that they did play better in that game for one reason or another. And it just seems like these things pop up, and they're going out to Iowa City. I think I'm going to take the Hawks in this. I could see somewhere maybe in the neighborhood of like a 17-14 game, or maybe like a 20-17 type of game. It's going to be a low scoring one, but it's just it's not a series that Iowa State's played very well in, and they're going on the road. And I didn't like what I saw defensively in that opener, and if they don't get those things cleaned up, we've seen what Iowa can do running the ball. So a lot of I think question marks with Iowa State coming into this game, and they're going on the road. You probably don't want to have so many of those question marks that you have off of this team, and you're going to go on the road to play the Hawks.
Question marks make me think a solid Iowa victory. I'm going 23-13. I'm choosing to believe in the Iowa offense. But I'm also recognizing that Kirk is back. And I think once they get that solid lead, if and when they get that solid lead, it'll be more of classic Iowa football, where it's solid lead. We're just trying to run the clock out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
when Iowa State's got to stop. Iowa State's got to stop the run too when they and get off the field on third down.
And that run, if it is all about the run, what does that do? It kills clock, and Kirk is going to love that. So we shall see how it ends up on Saturday. You can follow along, Bill, at iowastate.rivals.com. Cyclone Report there, part of the Rivals Network. Bill, we appreciate you hopping on.
Thanks, Eliot. Have a good one. We'll see you out there on Saturday.
All righty. We will wrap it up here. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of HawkCast, brought to you by Hawkeye Beacon and Iowa.rivals.com. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, you can do that today at Iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube, as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave that rate and review there as well. Drop a like, drop a comment on YouTube. Let us know what your final score prediction is. And once again, folks, I am Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. For now, we will see you next time.